now then. Back again. 65.
Episode 65, or that's how old you feel today?
Both. We're gonna go with
I know
both.
you had a rough day, John, so I feel bad for you.
No,
man.
you don't. You love it when I have a bad day.
Well, it depends on what kind of bad day it was. Like a legit bad day, I don't want you to have, but like a bad day where it's just a series of inconveniences that pile up and frustrate you, that I find funny.
You find humorous, and you want me to update you immediately. Yeah, it wasn't bad. Like just to explain what Josh is talking about. I've been having a lot of car problems, and my car's been overheating pretty bad. I went to practice yesterday. It was like 85 degrees here and humid. I had to ride the whole way to practice with my heat on to make it so I could get to practice. A lot of fun.
Oh, see, that's hilarious.
Right, see? I'm glad I can make you happy.
Good
news is I lost 7 pounds going there.
Well, there you go. That's excellent.
Yep.
All right. So tonight we have with us Mr. Luke. How do you pronounce your last name, Luke, before I say something stupid?
Pulscher. Like Vulture with a P.
There you go. So
Alrighty.
Luke Pulscher, who many of you probably know. If you don't know him, you should. So he's our guest tonight on episode 65. Thank you for coming on, Luke.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. We originally talked in, where were we? Reno. No, Tahoe.
Oh.
About the fact that you and your son both pulled. We were going to try to get both of you guys on, but we're going to have to get your son on later because he's a working man, huh?
Yeah, he's working.
That's good. Someone's got to pay the bills.
That's right. Somebody's got to pay for that trip to Hungary.
That's right. Hungary. So for all you suckers listening that still haven't got on the WAF bandwagon, Luke's going to Bulgaria. Where is it? Budapest, too. You just said it was in Hungary, and I forgot in 10 seconds. That's how good I am. So hopefully more of you guys will be joining us next year, wherever the heck it is. But so anyway, Luke, welcome to the show. We're glad to have you. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and hidden arm wrestling for those cats out there that don't know you?
I started arm wrestling, what is today, 2017, so about 18 years ago. Went to a little local tournament in Belle Fourche, South Dakota, a USAA event, Leonard and Denise. Mm-hmm. And I won. And I thought, I was pretty good at this, from arm wrestling in bars and stuff. And
sure.
A couple months later, I went to another tournament and I won again. And then I really thought I was something. Then I went to a tournament a few months after that, and there was arm wrestlers there, and I got my ass handed to me. But luckily for me, Leonard Harkless was the head ref at that event. And after the tournament, I went up to him and in pretty typical 20-something cocky fashion, I said, hey, I'm usually a lot better at this. Would you mind showing me a few things? And if anybody knows Leonard, he's pretty direct and blunt. And he said, yeah, you could be good at this, but you suck.
That's the only problem.
So he started showing me a few things, and the next tournament I showed up at, I was doing those, and so he showed me a few more things, and I don't know, 6-8 months after that, he started having me downside ref for him, and been competing ever since, I guess. I had a few years off there where I didn't pull very much because I had young kids and building the business and the standard stuff, but
always been in it, huh?
Yep.
And I watched videos from nationals, and I saw some pictures, and I saw you won 187s. Is that correct, right-handed?
Yep.
And I'm sitting there, and I've known you just from the past as being about maybe 220, 242 weight class. And I'm sitting there looking, and it's like someone posted the picture of 187 winners, and I'm looking at him like, who the hell is this guy? Like, honestly, I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't know who this guy is, and then I saw your name was somewhere, and I'm like, whoa, you have gotten in really good shape. So
I think a lot of guys at 187 were wondering who the hell is this guy.
yeah, so
before and after, they're like, what the hell, man?
and I heard from some people that you made 76 at Arnold's.
Yep.
So that's a pretty big drop. So what were you walking around at, and what are you walking around at now?
I'm walking around at about 190 right now. In the last year, I dropped about 65 pounds.
Wow.
I got tired of being a fat kid and finally took control of my nutrition. And it's amazing what happens if you don't eat Italian ices every day.
I was just about to
I wanted to become more competitive.
Right.
I wanted to have a legitimate shot at things like nationals and Masters Worlds and different stuff like that. And I knew it wasn't going to happen at 225 to 240. I've always been competitive there.
Yeah.
But those guys are just too big. I mean, you look at Marcio Barboza, he makes 225. Good Lord.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I was gonna say, someone like, that weight class you're talking about, guys, Marcio and, at a time, Brzenk, Devin, Matt Mass, these guys, they're very large guys, like just in structure. I mean, Marcio is kind of maybe not so large in as far as arm length and hand size and stuff, but he's just a special guy. But all those guys are just, you're either built into that class or you're not.
Yeah. Well, and they're at 225 to 240, they're cut. I was a little fluffy.
Uh-huh.
That's a great way to describe it, man. I love that. Well, you were not fluffy at USAF. I would say the word that I would use to describe you there was dominant. I mean, you smashed everybody, righty. I was very impressed by that. You had a good match with Mike West, too. And, not too many people beat Mike West in a straight-up hook. So I was impressed by that.
It's the first time I've ever pulled Mike. It's the first time I've pulled a lot of guys because I've never been in those weight classes.
Sure.
Right.
But I had a lot of guys that I respect telling me before that match, do not pull Mike in a hook. Try to take his hand, try to do whatever you can, but do not go into a hook with Mike. And so my plan was to try to top roll Mike and to stay out of the hook. And that was my plan right up until I put chalk on my hand. And when I looked at the table, I went, no, I want to know who's better in a hook. Mm-hmm. And luckily that day it happened to be me. I don't know that I'd count on that happening every time with Mike. I know he can be pretty sticky from what I understand, but
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he also pulling a lot of classes.
Exactly. He pulled like 100 classes that day.
Yeah. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'll take my win. But,
yeah, when Mike goes to a tournament, he tends to turn it into the Mike West Classic, which is why I enter in everything he can. But
that's so true.
As far as going from something like the 242s and 220s down to another weight class, especially after being in the sport for almost 20 years, is that pretty exciting to be able to go into a whole new, I'm going to go into a tournament and pull a whole group of guys that I don't ever compete with?
It is. It's really a lot of fun because I don't know a lot about them.
Right.
When you're 240, 220, you don't pay a lot of attention to who's pulling at 176 or 187 or even really 198. You pay attention to who there is. I mean, the good ones. Corey Miller, Devin Bear, AJ Henson, of course, Todd Hutchins, all the big dogs. Everybody knows them. But the guys that are highly competitive at those weights that aren't necessarily the elite, you don't know who they are, so you don't necessarily know what to expect. At the Arnold, and I don't even remember the name of the guy that I had my first match. Corey Miller, before the match, he said, "This is how he's going to set up. This is what you need to do." I did that. I dropped him right into a hook and right to the pin pad. It wasn't not to sound, but it wasn't that hard. It was a pretty good match for me to kick off the Arnold with, and found out later that he had won the Arnold at 54 a couple of times before he bumped up, and he was a couple of time national champ, and I didn't even know who he was. And no discredit to him by any means, but you just don't pay attention. On the other side, a lot of the guys don't know necessarily who I am at that weight either, and I think it's a huge advantage for me.
Yeah, because you're basically walking in as you're like a guy off the street in some ways, as far as maybe they might know who you are and you might know who they are, but you haven't studied them, right? You don't have like, I got this plan of attack that I've been working on for months because you never had the experience. So you're almost like a guy walking off the street, but you have almost 20 years of experience. So you're not just a guy off the street.
Right.
That's a pretty interesting thing because I've been, 176 or 165. I've been pulling 8 years. The whole time I've been the same weight. So it's always been the same. It's always been the same guys I've looked at. I'm like, what if I just went all of a sudden to 220? You know what I mean? Like, I'd be pulling a whole different.
Don't do that.
It'll either be by ice cream or other forms, but so yeah, it'll just be ice cream if I do.
Ice cream is always a good choice.
Well, it's not a bad
It
choice.
is.
Or Italian ice.
Well, Italian ice is a good choice if you're trying to stay relatively skinny, but ice cream is better in general as a life choice, I think.
All right.
You know what I mean?
I
So
don't disagree.
So how about your son, Luke? What did he just want to follow in Dad's footsteps, or did it take a lot of encouragement from you, or did he just jump in it?
No, he's just kind of jumped in it. I've got pictures of him on an arm wrestling table when he was in diapers. It's just one of those things. If you're around it enough, it's pretty natural. I think if your dad's a quarterback, you can probably throw a football. His dad happened to arm wrestle, and he's been lucky. I mean, I've been blessed with some wonderful people in the sport around me to help me and guide me from the Wyoming boys of AJ and Chris Chandler and Devin Bear and Corey Miller. I mean, we've all grown up in the sport together. And Wyatt gets access to those guys. I mean, he gets access to some of the elite guys in the sport at, 14, 15 years old. Trenton Meyer, he was a huge impact on my arm wrestling career. Believe it or not, until I trained with Trent, I didn't know how to hook. Mm-hmm. I was a top roller when I first started. And Wyatt had the opportunity to spend table time with Trenton. And really get to know him. And, Trenton used to call Wyatt after wrestling tournaments just to see how he was doing and tell him good job and to stick with it and stuff. Bob Brown, who I see is making smart ass comments on the Wyatt page there. So I'm watching you, Bob.
Yeah. Might be a first ever
Bob's
that a guest is watching the feed.
Yeah. Bob's been great as far as helping with training and technique and for myself and Wyatt and helping us set up training that benefits both of us in different ways. And Leonard Harkless, like I said before, has been a huge impact on me in the sport, and Wyatt. So it's just it was a very natural fit for him. A couple of years ago, he asked if he could start going to more tournaments and pulling the men's classes. Mm-hmm. And I told him he could once he was 15. Before that, I was just a little worried that his being a little bit younger in the men's classes that he had more opportunity to be hurt.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
So when he was 15, we started going to a couple of closer tournaments that we could drive to, and I told him, you're going to lose a lot until one day you don't, and then you're going to win a lot.
Yeah.
And he's just starting to cross over that. He got a couple of wins in the amateur division in the men's class, amateur at nationals, and that was huge. A month before nationals, over at a tournament that Corey Miller and AJ Henson put on, he got a win in the 198 pound amateur, weighing in at 145. So he's starting to make honest to God men work, and that's pretty exciting. Being able to go to Worlds with him is awesome.
Well, I think one of the reasons I, was talking to you about it so much is because, at Worlds, one thing that we lag significantly behind other countries is in our juniors divisions. I mean, they had, 500 or 600 kids, 16 and under, actually all the way up to 21, competing from all around the world very seriously, 10 or 11 people on individual countries, teams, and they trained very seriously. They were really good arm wrestlers because they were much more focused on technique for the most part, because a lot of them hadn't really, filled out as we all do as we age. So it's very impressive to watch. And I just, it made me a little sad because here in the States, we don't focus on the younger guys and girls at all. And we should be, because, there's all of us. Most of us have kids, John Braun being the exception for now.
Don't.
But Well, giving you some time here, man. You got time to catch up.
Thank you.
And Chance Shaw is watching right now, and he went to Worlds last year with us in Bulgaria, and he did very well, especially righty. And they are very tough classes. Like, there's quite a few kids over there that would do well in any of the pro classes over here in the States. So it's something that, the fact that you're doing it, my son is doing it. He's younger than yours, but I feel like more of us should encourage our kids to join up.
Yeah, Vosgin was talking to Wyatt at Nationals, kind of giving him an idea of what to expect, and it was, Vosgin's a little bit on the blunt side, which is great. But he told Wyatt basically, when you get there, the juniors have beards like this. they train, they have it in their schools, they have clubs and coaches, and he told Wyatt, if you want to train 2 or 3 times a week, stay home. If you're going to go train, you're 17 years old, you're nothing but walking testosterone. I think as Vosgin put it, at 17 years old, he has more testosterone than even the Russians. Hilarious. Just really kind of laid it out real matter of fact for Wyatt that, you've got 4 months. If you're going to go, be ready. And luckily, Wyatt's a pretty dedicated kid, and he took that to heart. He's been a wrestler since he was in kindergarten, so they got a pretty good work ethic when it comes to training. And so we've been on the table together probably every other day since Nationals. And then lifting weights and everything else on top of it. We were over to Wyoming to train with AJ Henson last week, and so he'll be as ready as he can be, but at least he's putting in the effort to go.
All right, I'm gonna drop in a couple questions from folks about that, but first, Steve Sanaway is saying hi, and Mike West also commented that you earned that win. He says so. Those little
thank you, Mike.
Props for you. But Paul Lynn asked earlier, and I would like you to answer this question while you're talking about training, about your most unique training method. But I'm curious in general about what your and your son's training looks like on an average week in terms of like the amount of table time versus weights and everything else. Just take us through it, if you will.
Okay. My workout and Wyatt's workout are a little bit different because he's still in school and stuff and doesn't have quite as much access to things, but I go to the gym. I work at a place called the Weight Room in Rapid City, and he's nice enough to let me keep an arm wrestling table there. Nice. So that's huge. So 2 days a week, I'm doing a little more traditional weightlifting. I do get some bench in and a lot of back work and, the fairly typical stuff, but more of a weightlifting routine to it. And then the other 2 days a week, I've got the arm wrestling table out, hooked up to the cable machine, doing static holds and pinning moves and, straps and all those different things, either for reps or for time or whatever. Most everything I do in the gym, I do with a fat grip or the Country Crush gripper. I don't use it. Yep. It's a great piece of equipment. I don't use it a whole lot for lat pulls, but I do a lot of pull-ups on it. Regular pull-ups, weighted pull-ups. They use it a lot for that. Put the fat grips on other bars. Even doing things like shoulder press, I put fat grips on. And stuff. Then other table time. My closest real training partners outside of Wyatt are over in Douglas, Wyoming, which is about 2.5 hours away. So, once in a while on Facebook, I see somebody post, is there anybody local that wants to arm wrestle? And somebody will comment, well, we've got a group that arm wrestles. They're about 1.5 hours away. And they say that's too far. And I'm like, I'd love 1.5 hours. That'd be awesome. But I try to get over to train with AJ once or twice a month. A little bit easier once the weather gets nice. We get winter up here, so it can be a little tough in the winter. Right now, Wyatt and I are getting on the table, like I said, every other day for 15 to 30 minutes. We work one thing a night. We'll do hook or we'll do top roll. We might do transitions. We have not spent a whole lot of time on like the press. Neither one of us are really built for a press. We're shorter limbed and it's hard to make a press really work. But we started working strap work. He's never really spent a whole lot of time in the strap. So we're doing that. And we're doing that, like I said, every night to every other night. It's great for Wyatt. I swear to God, I can feel him getting stronger every time we get on the table. For me, he's not big enough to tear me up. So it's almost like physical therapy. My arm has never felt better. It feels great. My tendon aches and stuff that you typically have just seem to be vanishing the more I pull with him. So
For sure.
It's fantastic for both of us.
Yeah.
I've
had people show up to trainings and be like, man, I think I'm just too sore to pull. And it's crazy to me because, like, I'll be like, get on the table. We're going to pull for about 2 or 3 minutes, about 20%, 30%. And while we're doing that, we're just in a hook, almost no pressure. Just talking with the teammates and stuff. And all of a sudden, 3 minutes goes by, and they get off the table and they go, wow, I feel great now. Like, all those little aches and stuff go away. And, like, light pulling is, like you said, it's almost like physical therapy when you have something like that.
Yep. And the other thing that I learned several years ago now is, realistically, when you're at a training, if you're training on the table, you should be able to train every other or every third day on the table without a lot of pain. If you hurt that bad after training, you're training wrong on the table. You shouldn't hurt that bad. It's not a tournament. It's training. Over the years, there's way too many people that are concerned whether they win or lose at practice.
Oh my God, that's so true.
There are so many things that you can work at practice that, you can tell it the next day you're sore and tight the way you would be from a good workout at the gym, but it shouldn't prevent you from getting back on the table within a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
No, I absolutely agree. There's 2 goals that we've said it before. The 2 goals of training, whether it's on a table or not, should be 2 things. Get stronger and don't get hurt. It's really simple. And for some reason, everybody wants to rip each other's arms off at training to the point where they can't train anymore. Just because I want to be strong enough to win. It's
every sport like ours has that problem. There's people that, when they're training for boxing or whatever, they overspar and they hurt their partners. And same thing with kickboxing. People get too excited and end up turning every little training session into competition. And those people, number one, as you were saying, Luke, they're walking around hurt all the time because they're pushing it too far and they're doing too much ripping. And as you mentioned, John, they're not actually getting stronger because their muscles are operating in a deficit all the time. They're not healing, like that slow pulling that I love focusing on in 3 of the trainings that we do every week. I just feel like it is, as you both said, it is like physical therapy. And I just feel like it's getting deep into the muscle fibers and you're just like constructing. Because I feel like you do, Luke, that when I do a lot of, what I'm going to say, light pulling or slow pulling, I feel my arms feel amazing. And I feel like my strength level goes up much more quickly than it does if I go to one, brutal training a week, which is like a small tournament. And we all know, places that you can go that are like that. And it amazes me how frequently you still encounter that because it's not a good way to train.
Yeah, in my opinion too, like the further along you go, like you said, like one brutal training versus like a bunch of slow pulling, taking it easy kind of trainings, not as far as, hitting and that kind of stuff. The further along you go with it, you should be getting conditioned to the point where you can have real hard trainings every other day on the table. This is not out of the question. Conditioning is a huge part of the sport too. And, if you're really in great shape, like some people claim they be in the sport, you shouldn't be destroyed for a week after a practice. You're not in good shape then for arm wrestling.
You shouldn't be destroyed for a week after a tournament.
Right, correct. 100%.
There's exceptions to that, certainly.
Injuries.
Injuries and, long tournaments. Even Wyatt was pretty sore for a few days after nationals. When you pull for 2 days, that wears on your body. The 2 days at the Arnold was one of the sore times I've been after a tournament. It wasn't even that many matches over 2 days. It was just a very high level of competitor, and 2 days in a row it'll wear on you. But still,
it does wear on you.
I was back in the gym working out within 4 days after the Arnold. I was back within 4 days after nationals.
I think one thing that is true of both of you guys, and quite a few of the people who've been around for a long time, is that it's like training for a marathon or something. You can't just go out and run 26 miles. You have to build up to it, and over the course of time, what your arms can take without having a long rebound time increases. So, like you, John, pulling every day, basically, your ability level to take, trauma on your arm is much higher than the average arm wrestler, even people that have been doing it for decades. But you train similarly to him, Luke, which is, I don't know. The more I think about it, especially as I get older, I feel like that type of training makes more sense.
Well, I'm sure there's people out there that are, screaming at their computer going, no, you've got to beat the crap out of yourself to grow. And if that's what you need and what you like, go for it.
Right.
He's telling us he disagrees with us right now.
That's how I feel too. Like, some people are like, I train on the table once every 3 or 4 weeks, and I focus all on weights otherwise. And I go, you know what? If you feel strong and it works for you, then go ahead. It's just not the way I work. It's not this totally different than how you work, and that's fine. Maybe, maybe they're more of just pure power. Maybe they're built for a lot different than I am. But, yeah, there's a lot of ways to do it, for sure. And for me, I can definitely do this every day. This is not an issue. It might vary in intensities, but, you should.
But I think the biggest thing when it comes to whether it's in the gym or on the table is your programming and how you've got your workout programming set up. And I set my programming up to function together between the weight room and the table time. Mm-hmm. So it's not, I go to the gym and I do a weightlifting program and then I get on the table to practice. They very much sync up the way that I've got them put together. So my table time, whether it's gym table time or whether it's table time with Wyatt or going over to Douglas or whatever, it's very strategic in my training protocol. I don't haphazard anything at this point. I can't afford to. The one Worlds is 4 months away. I'm 42 years old. If I haphazard something, I hurt or get hurt. Mm-hmm. I've this last year, along with changing nutrition and stuff, I changed the way I work out completely. I've gotten away from traditional body splits in the gym and gone to more of a whole body workout, although I have quit lifting legs because it was getting too hard to make weight. But, so I hit the entire upper body when I do a normal weightlifting routine. It's not chest and back or bis and tris. I'm hitting everything when I'm in there. I'm just hitting them in different ways. Some days it's for reps and sets, and other days it's for max reps for time. And so I'm always varying it. It takes about 5 to 7 days before I hit a workout again after I've done it once.
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, and it depends too, like how much time. Like you said, you got 4 months to do this. You have a goal at the end of this, so there's going to be basically a training cycle, right? You have a plan where you're going to start, where you're going to end. It has to do with volume and intensities and all this kind of thing. And whether or not that's really, how you structure that's all up to you, of course. But, and I feel the same way. If I have a goal like 2 months from now, I definitely have goals at the end of it, and how I'm going to get there might be different. Some people are going to do it through, being mostly in the weight room. Some people are going to do it from being mostly on the table. And it might be as close as like my first 6 weeks are going to be focused more on endurance on the table, and then the last 6 weeks are going to be for power, depending on how, what your opponent is or whatever. But yeah, there's tons of ways to do it. And
if you're blessed to have a group of people that you can train with, that you can get the majority of your building and your growth in the sport on the table, man, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. I've never had that. I've had training partners come and go that are local, and it's the same old story. They pull for a while, they go to a tournament, they don't win, they don't show up to practice anymore. So I've never had the option to just do table time. I'd have loved that. It would have been fantastic. It would still be fantastic if I could get on the table with 3 or 4 or 5 reasonably strong individuals that have some knowledge of arm wrestling once a week or twice a week, even better. It'd be amazing. I just don't have it. So I have to supplement in the weightlifting and the cable work and the band work and the stuff like that. I don't have an option.
Yeah, and where there's a will, there's a way, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Luckily, like we discussed earlier, I don't have kids or anything. So when I used to live in New Hampshire, I didn't have anybody. I used to go to the dungeon every weekend, which was in Connecticut with Klemba and Tim Bresnan and all those guys. I used to drive 2 hours each way every weekend. And then I would usually drive an hour and a half on Wednesdays to Badger Drew's club in Manchester, New Hampshire. And then every once in a while, I would really go crazy and go to Team Mass on Thursdays and see Mr. Josh, or Sundays and go to Josh's, which were both also 2 hours away. At that time, that was really crazy as far as the traveling goes. Now I'm really lucky where I'm in Minneapolis, and we have like all these little satellite clubs, and the longest I really have to go is an hour. So like now I'll pull a minimum of 3 days a week with different groups, and the longest I drive is an hour, which, you know, it makes me laugh when someone's like, oh, an hour and a half is too far. You know, I'm like, oh, an hour is so great. You know, now after a minimum was like basically 2 hours before.
I actually love this topic because every time, you know, we start talking about it, there's just about an equal number of people that will say that's the exact right way to train as there are that will say that's the worst way to train ever.
Yeah, I love it too.
And so, I mean, you know, I brought up Engin Terzi a couple of times on the show because I know that he does basically no table time whatsoever for 3 or 4 months before Worlds.
Yeah.
And he relies on the fact that, you know, he's one of those guys who's been pulling forever and he feels like his technique is set and all he really needs to do is work power. And then there's a lot of people that believe that you should rest much more than any of us do on this show. So.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up another topic, too, of, you know, Engin, as far as what I've read, I've never talked to him, but as far as what I've read, what he's written down, was a lot of that comes from old injuries. You know, he's had a lot of elbow and shoulder injuries over the years, and he, from what I've read anyway, table time bugs those injuries bad for him. So that might be something too, you know, it changes over time. Things flare up, things get hurt, you have surgeries. You can't do exactly what you did before because, you know, to maximize your efficiency and make sure you're ready for a competition, you know, you might not be able to do those same things you used to be able to do. Or even what you prefer to do, you know.
I think too, you know, unless you're seeing it, you got to take that stuff with a grain of salt.
Of course.
Now Engin may very well not touch a table for a few months before Worlds. I mean, that's, you know, he's been around a long time and he certainly knows what he's doing. He's probably one of the most well-versed training and technique guys in the world.
For sure.
You know, how many times have we all heard in the sport that Brzezinski never lifted weights? All he did was table time. Well, you know, I don't know that I buy that 100% because I talk to guys that used to train with John and that have trained with John, and yeah, he got a ton of table time and probably more than most ever would have gotten because of the groups that he was always around and the amount of people that would show up to practices. But John was doing other stuff. He may not have been in doing bench press because, let's be honest, bench press is a pretty irrelevant exercise unless you bench press or you need to get through the combine. Outside of that, bench press is somewhat irrelevant for almost anything. But, you know, I'd bet money that John was doing other stuff besides just table time. And then you go, you know, the complete other end of the spectrum. I don't know, complete other end of the spectrum. But look at Todd Zilla. Yeah. And here's a guy that he gets his table time and stuff, but Todd's taking the approach of just screw it. I'm just going to flat be stronger than everyone. And he trains that way. And he trains to be the most powerful person on the table. And if you've ever had the opportunity to slow pull with Todd or to be on a practice table with him, sick. It's just wrong how strong he is. It's not even right. And he tells you that when he's pulling with you, which, you know, makes you feel silly. You know, when you're pulling on somebody who goes, you know, it's just not even right, is it? No, it's not. Let go of me. You know, but you know, there's a lot of different ways to get there. I think the big key is you've got to be willing to put in the time to actually get there.
Yeah, there's a couple of people that are taking little opposite approach in terms of the bench press. I mean, we always talk about bench press not being particularly useful, but Jerry Cadorette just says he relies on it. Chris Gobby is also saying that it supports side pressure for him.
All right, so for Jerry Cadorette, yeah, look at the way Jerry pulls. Of course he relies on bench press. He's basically bench pressing on the table. No offense, Jerry, you're the man when it comes to that style of pulling. I can absolutely see where the way Jerry pulls benches is critical for that. And not to get into arguments, but the comment that it builds side pressure, I'm going to disagree with that. Biomechanically, bench press doesn't build side pressure. If you want to build side pressure with your chest, you got to do things like dumbbell press and flies and the Smith machines and the pec decks and the stuff like that. If you want that chest to incorporate, I'm not insinuating that you don't need a strong chest. I'm just saying that there's a lot of ways to get a strong chest that are more relevant to arm wrestling than flat bench.
Mm-hmm. I do think it depends on the technique as well, and I think everybody's mechanics do vary slightly. And I don't know if certain body types may be more useful than others. Both Scott Mendelson and Sean Latimer, who are 2 world record bench pressers, came on the show and said they didn't think it was very useful at all. But it is an argument. People have different opinions on it. In terms of rest, we were talking about it a little bit. Jerry also mentioned that he thinks 2 weeks of rest is essential prior to a big tournament. What do you do?
Depends on how big the tournament is. I took probably a full 7 days off of most everything before nationals. For me, 2 weeks is a little long. I'm not going to be lifting heavy or training heavy 2 weeks out, but I'm still going to be in the gym regular. That last week, I'm still going to go in and I'm going to be doing some pull-ups and just some light stuff I like keeping everything moving. I like to keep the blood pushing to the areas, not getting tired, not getting fatigued in any way, just more rehab lifting, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a small tournament, I lift the day before.
Sure. Yeah. For you too, does it depend if you're cutting calories to make weight or not?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Does it depend for you on whether you're cutting calories or not for a tournament? How your rest goes, how your rest cycle goes?
No.
No. Okay. Yeah. For me, for some reason, it might not be even useful. But if I'm cutting weight or really just watching what I'm eating, I'll usually take a couple extra days from heavier stuff. I agree with you. I think 2 weeks off just completely feels a little long. But usually I'll start about 10 days out. Like that's my last super hard training. And then I'm just cutting it down until I get to the tournament.
I think that one's very individual. I think you got to play around with that, figure out what's best for your body. If you're the kind of person that you need 2 weeks to really feel rejuvenated and fresh and ready to go, then by all means take your 2 weeks. But that's what the little tournaments are for, is figuring that stuff out. How much rest do you really need to be at 100% or as close to it as you can possibly be. You got to play with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Calories and everything else. I'm learning how to. It seems silly. I've never cut weight for tournaments. I was a fat kid.
Yeah.
Even if you're dropping 10 pounds to make 225, that's not cutting when you're fluffy.
Right.
Now learning to cut that's a whole new ball game for me. And I mean, as we saw at nationals, I failed at it. I was hoping for 76. I wasn't there.
Watch the weight cutting show.
Lucky for me, it worked out. But so that's something that I'm actively practicing, just like I'm practicing my hook or my top roll or my chin ups. I'm practicing my weight cut to make sure that I don't ever miss a weight again.
Yeah, we did a show with a doctor that advises the UFC fighters on weight cutting, and he gave us the formula that he thinks works the best for most people. Not that it works for everybody, but you should check it out because I've used it ever since. I do feel like it's less traumatic than what I used to do. But
I'll expect you to message me that. That would be fantastic.
well, I mean, yeah, I can't remember what episode show it is, but so you should probably watch it to make sure I'm not screwing it up. But in essence, it's the best place to cut is a sauna, not steam rooms, not hot tubs, not baths. And that the two things that I thought were interesting is that you should continually be wiping the sweat off your body, because your body's mechanism for cooling is to coat you with a layer of liquid. And so if you don't continually wipe off that sweat, you won't continue to sweat at the same rate, which is why steam rooms and other forms of liquid heat are less effective, because you sweat at a slower rate. So and when he went on from there, but I used to do steam rooms and hot tubs because I find them less miserable than saunas. But I have noticed that I lose weight much faster in a sauna.
Interesting.
But there's a lot more into it, so you can watch the show if you want to get the specifics. But
yeah, I've always cut with hot baths, and I've always had really good luck with it. I have not yet to try a sauna since I heard that show. So, not that I don't want to say I'm looking forward to it, but I'm kind of looking forward to see the difference anyway.
I'll tell you, it's a lot easier to stay in a bathtub for a long time than it is to stay in a sauna. It just gets more brutal. Because I was sitting there, I was thinking to this last time, I was like imagining I had to stay in here like 10 more minutes to save the lives of my son or something like that. And after 9 minutes, I was like, man, how much do I love that I can't But I made it. But yeah, back to the rest thing. I mean, for me, if you look at other sports, like running, for example, which I do a lot of, despite the fact that a lot of people tell me not to. If you're running a big race, you don't stop running completely. You just don't run as fast or as hard or as long. Exactly. So I think that the formula that you guys are talking about is one I use too. It's not that I don't do anything. It's that I'm lifting very light stuff, or at the climbing gym, I'm not climbing ridiculously hard stuff. I'm climbing, relatively easy things. So I keep my muscles moving and active, but I'm not traumatizing them as I would normally be doing.
Yeah, because really the point of when you go through a hard training cycle, we'll just call it that, which is pretty much for arm wrestlers our whole career. If you go through a hard training cycle, at the end of it, once you taper down, there should be some kind of compensation, which is your body's really used to burning a bunch of calories, recovering quickly, all these things it has to do to keep up with the workload that you're putting on. Hopefully you're putting on just slightly more than it can really handle, because otherwise you're not going to adapt to anything. And hopefully at the end, when you start to taper down, however many weeks that is, that's when that compensation should happen. So you should come into the tournament. Your goals never should be to come into the tournament at 100%. It should be to come in at 102, 103%, right? You want to be the best version you've ever been of yourself. And that's where, is it hit or miss? Of course. But hopefully the work that you put in, and then the cutting down the workload to compensate for all that, works out for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's interesting to me, we have these conversations week in, way out, and week in, week out. And I feel like our sport is missing the kind of cabal of experts that have, broken down how to train to be the best arm wrestler, and sell programs and have training stuff. And it's like all of us are figuring it out on our own, of listening to our personal mentors and watching the people that we admire, whatever, and piecing it together. But we don't have a formula like you do in a lot of other sports. It gets adjusted based on body type and other sports too, but people at least have a general idea how to train for their specific sport. MMA is another example, but we don't really have that. We don't have training camps in arm wrestling where you go someplace for 6 weeks and do all of these, X number of exercises in a certain fashion, and you come out, ready for worlds. It's interesting that we're still at a somewhat of beginning level in terms of advanced level training.
Yeah, I don't know that I 100% agree with that, because if you go out and you do your homework and you do your research on some of the things that are out there, you read the Engen Terres stuff. Forgive my pronunciation, Engen, if you happen to see this. You look at the training stuff that Devin Lorette has videos out there on. You ever sit down and talk training with Bob Brown? There's just 3 guys right there that have put an actual lot of effort into specifically programming for arm wrestling and how to build that workout programming, what exercises, what routine, why, how do you progress, how do you how do you move through that? I'm not going to say that it's as fine tuned as how to be an MMA fighter or how to be a NFL football player, where you've got your strength and conditioning coaches that have been, educated on that to that level. I think it's more of an issue of people not willing to follow the road that's out there because you think you've got a better way.
Sure.
It's just in our sport, you got a lot more people that can get away with, and maybe get away isn't the right way to look at it, but we're not a huge mainstream sport yet. So you've got more people that can come in and do well without having to have that perfect setup or that great training in place, where the people that decide to do it on their own in the football world, you don't ever hear about them because they're not in the NFL.
Gotcha.
They're not in the UFC octagon. But we're the only professional sport I know of where Joe Blow can walk in off the street and enter the pro class.
Mm-hmm.
Try that at UFC. Good luck. One, you'll get hurt. So I think it's more than just the research isn't there. I think there's a lot of research there if you're really willing to go out and look and actually follow it.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, and you actually agreed, believe it or not, with Chris Gobby right there. You guys both made the same comment almost at the same time.
Oh, so we're going to need to cut the episode. I can't be agreeing with Chris.
But I hear your point on that, and I agree with Chris and you in the sense, because you sort of both ended up talking about the same guy. And what I think we're missing is the idea. There definitely are people that have at least figured out the formula that works for them and probably would work for a great number of people, but it's not like it's something you can just go get. I mean, like you said, you have to seek it out. You have to do a lot of research and fight with it and study it and, go train with people. And I think that not everybody's going to do that. Chris Gobby said not everyone has the plums to do that. And I think that's accurate because the way he trains is very difficult and challenging and brutal. And there's a lot of people that are hobbyists and aren't going to do that anyway. But that being said, it's not like you can look it up and discover this program or go to a camp, like I said, and, come out 6 weeks better. And, see if you take somebody like, Anderson Silva, who doesn't really train at all, and then he does a 6-week program, and at the other side of it, he would be the best in the world. That's not something that I think we have established in the same level. And I'm not sure if that's just because the sport is still kind of new in terms of, on the world stage and ESPN and all that kind of stuff. And it's been mostly all of us just trying to piece it together.
That I'd agree with. But I think that's a U.S. problem.
Mm.
I mean, if you look at the Russians and the other Eastern Bloc countries and European countries, and the juniors divisions, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, where they've got it in their schools, and they Igor Mazurenko and his training stuff that's on YouTube, and I mean there's a lot of stuff out there that we don't necessarily have the access to, but is definitely there.
Well, we have Rustam Babiev coming on the show next week, and I'm going to be asking him a lot of questions about that, because I do notice, Luke, that when you see those videos, they do have quite a bit of consistency to them. There's a few exercises that all of them seem to do. It's like their version of the wrist wrench. They're doing this, and they have the little band they wrap around their hand, and they're doing back pressure with it, that kind of stuff. Almost everybody that you watch over there does those exercises.
Yeah, for sure. And
I don't know.
Well, it kind of, I think a lot of the things we're discovering along the way, it really just shows the youth of the sport as far as understanding the training, like we were kind of saying before. How many years ago would it been almost out of the question for anybody to train more than once a week on the table? Or even like twice a week, you're a little like, oh, you might be overtraining if you're doing twice a week. But now it's very, very, in my opinion, very open to somebody to say, I've trained 4 to 5 days a week on the table. That's possible for me to do. It's possible. Like there was a time, even when I was newer anyway, where that would have been like twice a week was considered to be, you're dipping into overtraining, man. You're going to be if you keep doing that, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. And it's like now I don't think that's the belief. People might not think it's the best way, but people are on board with believing that's not overtraining as far as the sport goes. So like, what are we gonna know in 5 or 10 more years? You know, it's like you said, it's like kind of like the UFC, where when they were in their infancy, of course, other sports knew how to train a little bit better. You know, like boxing and these kind of things. But you know, are you telling me that the programs 10 years ago are the same as the programs now?
Yeah, they're not.
I don't think so. You know, it's just I think we're all learning as we go, but like obviously other sports are just far ahead.
Yeah, and I think your point's legit, Luke, on, you know, overseas versus here, especially particularly Eastern Europe. I think they are 10 years ahead of us in training. But I think, you know, and it's having trained with quite a few Eastern Europeans, there's much less of a stigma attached to, you know, chemical enhancement over there compared to here. And I think that's it's a major issue. It's why a lot of those guys don't pull WF anymore.
Right. But on that note, you know, I would say, you know, Eastern Europe is ahead of us by 10 years in training on all strength sports, not just arm wrestling, all strength sports, and have consistently been 10 years ahead of us on strength sports. And then you bring up the supplementation opportunities.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
And you can't argue that that's a benefit, but it's not a magic bullet either. No. You've still got to put in the time and the gym and the table and everything else to, you know, if anything, it'll help you heal faster, from what I understand. But, you know, and maybe it makes up for some poor training habits that you can get away with more. But, I mean, you got to put in the work still.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the conventional wisdom about steroids is, you know, whatever sport you're in, you have to be elite already. And then taking the steroids makes you, you know, whatever, one of the top in the world. You can't just go from an amateur to being world class just by popping a few pills.
I mean, you look at the world of bodybuilding, and, you know, you know, we'll all agree that there's supplementation in bodybuilding, especially at the pro level. And with the cocktails that they're utilizing and the amount that they're utilizing and everything else on top of it, and they're happy if they can put on a half a pound of muscle in a year.
Right.
So, I mean, I hear the argument on the steroids and the stuff for the Eastern Europeans, and I've heard it, you know, for 17, 18 years that I've been in the sport. And I think it's a cop-out to the work they're putting in. I mean,
well, it's a cop-out in general. I mean, it's one of those things that, and it's, John and I have talked about this a lot, but it's kind of frustrating because, you know, when someone beats you, you can say, oh, that guy's juicing. You know, there's, you know, it is, like you say, it's a way to get away from admitting someone's better than you. And, you know, not everybody is using, and even if they are using, who says they should still be able to beat you?
Right. I don't care if the guy on the table is using or not. I really don't. Now, I love the fact that WAF has tested.
Right.
WAL is very much not. I know they have a drug testing policy now, but just because it's you know, not heavily tested, it wouldn't keep me from pulling WAL at some point. I don't care.
Have you pulled them yet? Have you done one of their tournaments?
Yeah, I've been to Vegas for one of their first Vegas tournaments. The first year when their finals was in Louisiana. Qualified. I was the Wyoming overall state last year to go, and I don't know. I'm not a huge WAL fan. I think what they're doing for the sport is great. I just don't. I don't know. I look at their little flow chart on how to get to Vegas this year, and I'm a fairly intelligent guy, and I didn't have the decoder ring to be able to map that sucker out. So, but no, I love what they're doing for the sport. Anything is good for our sport, and they're getting TV coverage, and they're getting people talking about it. And you know, I've got friends that pull WAL, and I hope they do well, and I hope it works out great for them. And I may pull WAL next year. I don't know. I'm certainly not putting it off the table. It's just not a focus right now. I I want a world title. I've wanted a world title since the first time I stepped on a table, and that's where I'll focus for now.
Yeah, I think your goals are good, and also with WAL, like you said, it's not off the table, but I'm looking forward to the WAL just settling down and picking rule sets and what they're going to do and sticking with it for a year. That'd be phenomenal. You know what I mean? Because it's like man, like with the straps and the slip and losing position whole thing all year, we end up going back to where we started.
Yeah.
Where now, if you slip in losing position, it's or if you intentionally slip, it's a foul. If it's a slip in losing position, it's a loss. It's like, isn't that where we were? Like we went all the way through single loops and.
Well, if you go back and look at the sport, even just the last 5 years, and whoever's gonna be a promoter this year or this month, and bless them all, because that's what drives the sport forward.
For sure.
But everybody that comes on, and I'm going to put on tournaments, but I'm going to do the rules this way because I've got a better way, it all drifts back to a pretty generic set of rules that are at least loosely based off of WAF. And I mean, yeah, I understand some of the things to make it more TV friendly and stuff like that. And I don't disagree with that. The running fouls thing that, it kind of got its real start with Arm Wars and Neil Pickup.
Correct.
It's very viewer friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I have a like or a dislike for it. It is what it is. I think for TV, it's great. But trying to monkey a new strap for this or that, or it goes back to the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been spending a lot of time trying to figure out exactly why things are going the way they are with WAL, because they have a lot of support, but they also have a lot of, and a great deal of it is frankly earned. I mean, I'm a fan of the WAL, and I hope they succeed. But I mean, like watching that show on Saturday when I got home from the climbing competition, it was disappointing to see how many very loose matches there were in terms of refereeing, and with some really big name people. And I feel like, that's not going to encourage longevity if you can't have consistent reffing. I mean, it just opens up for accusations of, bias and, which they've already had to a certain extent. And I feel like, a lot of those things are easily fixable. And I really am not sure why they're not fixing it. And John's point is very good. It's like, consistency matters. I mean, if people, like you're saying with the Dakota rig and trying to figure out how to qualify, if it's the same every year, obviously there's going to be small changes, but if it's largely the same every year, then it's something that we get used to, and you get into a rhythm with it, and it's something it's easier to follow, it's easier to participate, it's easier to compete. And I do think they're missing that.
I can't comment on the reffing at the WAL events in case I ever actually want to pull them.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. You know what I mean? And it's like the thing is the refs are good. They're people that have ref matches, and I've been psyched about it. And I'm like, they're good. They're good at what they do. If something happens at those big events, I don't know what it is, but I don't know if the people get caught up in the adrenaline of whoever's pulling, but it's just like some crazy stuff happens and nobody seems to care. So
I don't think the refs in WAL are set up to succeed.
Yeah, I agree with that. And
actually, Leonard Harkless made that comment on last week's show. He said exactly what you said.
Right. It's just I think it makes, is it better for TV and the setup and everything? I don't know, but or is it faster? I don't know, maybe. But it really makes the ref's job just impossible. It's literally impossible to do a perfect job because we don't want to foul people. But we're going to put rules in place for fouls. Mm-hmm. Well, it kind of gets weird when you do stuff like that because if you have people closing their hands and carving in, well, we don't want to foul people out for that. Well, then we got to take out the rule that matters then. Because if there's a rule that it matters, then you have to call something.
Well, if you want to go to fast setup, low fouls, and making sure that matches get decided off of a pin instead of off of a foul or a referee decision, you got to go back 20 years and start every match in a power hook.
I knew it. I knew it was coming.
I'm fine with that.
I bet you are. Can I roll out of the hook?
If you can, go
All right.
for it.
All right. I'll go with that.
Josh found out rolling out of my hook isn't so easy.
Oh, I'm not going to try, you know.
I wasn't trying to roll out of it. I was trying to not get in it, which was all did have a lot of success with. You may have noticed, but yeah, well, you know, I mean, there's people have all different ideas about it. Like you said, everybody starts their own league and they have all the different rules. Bob Brown just commented that the only thing that's going to determine the WL future is TV ratings, and I said that almost exact comment I think 2 weeks ago on the show. Is that nobody else who watches the sport knows any of this shit that we're complaining and whining about, and they don't give a fuck about it, to be honest with you. If it's fun for them to watch, they're going to watch it, and that's the end of the story. So WAL may be outsmarting all of us in that sense. You know, that's what their focus is, and, you know, we're kind of like annoyances to them, and they're going to try to keep us happy so we keep showing up. But, you know, the American public doesn't know who the top arm wrestlers are in the country. So if, you know, 5 guys show up that are really fun to watch, that are actually the 10th and 20th best players, you know, in our sport, but they're more fun to watch on TV and they put a good show on, then that's on us.
From what I understand, Steve Kaplan really likes arm wrestling. I think that's awesome. If you think Steve Kaplan's making decisions for WAL based on arm wrestling, you're drunk. He's a businessman, and he's obviously a very, very good one, and he's trying to figure out how does he make money on arm wrestling. I have no problem with that. If he can figure it out, that's awesome. If it helps the sport, that's even better for us. But between TV sponsorship, TV ratings, and other corporate sponsors like Monster Muscle, that's what Bob's 100% right. That's what's going to determine it. And if Steve decides that arm wrestling is costing him too much money, it won't be around very long.
Sure.
Right. So I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see what happens. But it's fun to watch. I mean, we had the same thing with Game of Arms when it came on. We're all laughing about arm wrestling tournaments and abattoirs with the dead animal swinging around in the background. It's like, yeah, that's how we live our life too. And you know, there was
that's the terms I know.
It's just like, but it was the most watched reality program on AMC.
Yep.
You know, we watched that first episode, and my son, so I don't even know how many years ago that was now, but he must have been, 13, 14 years old, and he said, either there's a world of arm wrestling that you haven't told me about, Dad, or this isn't very real. I'm like, yeah, it's for TV.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We've had you on here for like an hour and 15 minutes, Luke. I don't know if there's subjects we failed to cover or not, but I don't want to keep you away from your real life forever, because I'm sure you have more important things to do than talk to a bunch of idiots online.
Nothing could be more important than you.
Oh, that's sweet.
I'll tell you what, man. I'm really excited that you're coming, you know, to Budapest, and I hope that us continually talking about it in this show and people like you deciding to go is going to encourage more and more people to go, because I really would like to see the best available people that we have in every weight class go, because I feel like, you know, we have a much bigger position in the worldwide stage of arm wrestling than we're currently taking at WAF. So I'm looking forward to it, man. It's going to be a blast, and I really appreciate you coming on the show and spending some time with us, and hopefully we can do it again, maybe with your son.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm sure Wyatt would love to find a time that he can be on with you.
We will do it. We will do it.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. Have a great night. See you next week. And don't forget, send in questions for Rustam.
Do it.
You have some too, Luke. You know, so I got like 8 or 9 of them. They're pretty good, but we could use a couple more.
Perfect.
All right, guys.
Until then.
Night.